Hey everybody, Jim here with another video for you. This is kind of a follow-up to my drive-in memories series. So I'm going to call this one Drive-In Memories dash Coda, Exploitation and Drive-In Movies. But before we begin, at the end of this movie, if you like what you see, please consider giving me a thumbs up, a possible subscribe. Most important, please leave comments below. Now, I don't know if everybody watching this video has seen my previous installments, but I grew up in a drive-in, basically. I went there numerous times growing up as a child, and I even worked there one summer in 1986, which was a focus of a video all its own. And that was supposed to be the end of that series. However, that series was a lot of fun to do, and it kind of put me in this frame of mind of the summer's almost over. We only got a couple of weeks left of the summer as I filmed this video. And I was thinking, why don't I do a video about drive-in movies? Not necessarily movies that I saw at the drive-in, but movies that basically played at drive-ins and made their reputation at those theaters. Because, as I said in one of the earlier installments, before Star Wars, and definitely before Jaws, the summer was a dumping ground for exploitation movies and kid movies for the most part. So these movies are basically, for the most part, exploitation movies of one kind or another. And they just happen to start their run times at the drive-in around the country. So let's just go through this with no particular order. I'm going to start off with comedies, slowly work through some action, and end with horror, okay? So let's just have some fun. So the first one that I'm going to feature is the Kentucky Fried Movie. Now, this was definitely a drive-in exploitation movie. Anybody who's seen this movie knows what I'm talking about when I say exploitation movie, because this movie is pretty damn raunchy, has gratuitous nudity, is very politically incorrect. It's hilarious. But yes, I recall seeing the ads in my local newspaper advertising this at the drive-in when I was a child. I was just too young to see it originally, but Kentucky Fried Movie was definitely one of those films. This one I did happen to see at the drive-in, and I included in one of those videos. Rock and Roll High School. This one was from the Corman Factory. This is my Shout Factory steelbook. You're going to see a lot of Corman movies in this countdown, or not countdown, but in this particular video, because Roger Corman was like Cannon Films before Cannon Films. He specialized in cheap exploitation type movies, and most of them played the drive-in circuit. That's what they were designed for. And this movie was definitely designed for that crowd. Next, we got a double feature pack for you. I saw one at the drive-in. I did not see the other, but Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, and Race with the Devil are certainly drive-in movies. They fit that description perfectly. They are exploitation movies to, well, this one's an exploitation movie to a degree. This one wears that on its sleeve. And again, these are the types of films that would play constantly at the drive-in during that time period, along with movies like Vanishing Point and the original Gone with 60 Seconds. I actually saw that one at the drive-in. Eat My Dust, Grand Theft Auto, movies like that. And certainly, speaking of Roger Corman and race car driving movies, Death Race 2000 was definitely a drive-in movie. This came out in '75, and there's Sylvester Stallone right there, and David Carradine, and I absolutely love this movie. When I think of drive-in movies, this is actually one of the very first ones that pops into my head, even though I did not see this at a drive-in. But again, this is the quintessential drive-in movie. It's just, Maximum Overdrive is like the quintessential 80s drive-in movie, but this is like the OG, and the movie that we're going to end this video with. And you'll know about that when I get to it, but classic. If you haven't seen Death Race 2000, do yourself a favor. This movie's great. And then we've got Convoy. I did see this one theatrically at the drive-in when I was a kid. This came out right after Smokey and the Bandit, so, you know, of course, that whole craze was going on at that time. And yeah, it's a decent movie. But again, certainly fits the drive-in bill. That's exactly what this movie was made for. This one is Exploitation Gold. This is one of those classic films that definitely started off in the drive-in and grindhouse circuit back in the early 70s. We're talking about Rolling Thunder with William Devane and Tommy Lee Jones. And this is one of Quentin Tarantino's favorite movies, 1977. I'm wrong. I thought this came out earlier than that. But regardless, classic film. Exploitation at its best. Now, I included this one, and this one might be controversial, but tough shit. It's my video. I'll do what I want. Mad Max. Because Mad Max was certainly a drive-in movie. Drive-in movies in the 70s included movies that didn't really play anywhere else. And Mad Max did not get a huge release in the States. The Road Warrior did 3 years later, but it wasn't called Mad Max 2 like it was everywhere else in the world, because most people in America had never heard of this movie, much less seen it. But I do recall this playing at one of the drive-ins in my theater, in my area at the time. I didn't see it at the drive-in. I saw it on cable in a horrible American dub where they replaced even Mel Gibson's voice. It's just god-awful. But yeah, love Mad Max. But yes, it was certainly a drive-in movie. And so is this one, Escape from New York. Now, this movie became a cult classic. But at the time, Kurt Russell was not yet a action star. This was certainly not an action star. This was his first action movie, and it was one of his first adult performances. So this was a dumping ground, again, at that time, for low-budget movies, and Escape from New York certainly fit the bill. The thing that elevated this at the time was the fact that John Carpenter directed it, and he was still red hot from the last few years from Halloween and, to a lesser extent, The Fog. Both of those movies were solid hits, and so was Escape from New York. This is my drive-in movie. This is the one that turned me into a John Carpenter fan and a Kurt Russell fanatic, because I saw this one at the drive-in, and yeah, I love Escape from New York so much. Now we're going to get into some Jaws ripoffs, and all three of them, again, designed for the drive-in. I saw two of them at the drive-in. I saw one of them on cable, but we're going to start off with Grizzly, which is probably my favorite Jaws ripoff of all time. And I did see this one at the drive-in when I was about 10 years old. And 9 years old, actually. I'm sorry, it came out in 76. And this movie scared the shit out of me when I was a kid. I watched it now, and I just laugh. I think it's funnier than Cocaine Bear, but I love it. I still love it. And again, Jaws ripoff, exploitation at its best. This movie was designed for the drive-in, and before Halloween came out, this was the most successful independent movie of all time. It even beat the one that we're going to get to at the end. But yes, until Halloween came along, Grizzly was the biggest independent hit of all time. And it started off with the drive-in. This one, definitely saw at the drive-in, Orca the Killer Whale. And again, this is definitely in my top 5 Jaws ripoffs. I'm actually going to do like a top 10 Jaws ripoff video eventually, because there were so many of them, and I own so many of them. But Orca, I love Orca. And again, drive-in movie. And the strangest Jaws ripoff of all time, but also one of the most entertaining, The Car, where Jaws is a car. And again, this movie was a summer drive-in hit. It's awesome in every way. And again, 1977, just like Orca, in a year after Grizzly. They were all still ripping off Jaws, 2-3 years after that one came out. And yeah, this movie's a blast. Okay, let's get into some sci-fi before we get into the full-blown horror. First, we got a couple creature features for you, Without Warning. And yeah, that is definitely a drive-in movie. And look at that goofy bastard. It's still, I gotta zoom in on him every time I highlight this movie, because that guy is just too funny looking. But yeah, this movie's a lot of fun, and it's stupid as hell. 1980, okay? But yeah, definitely a drive-in flick. I did not see this one theatrically at the drive-in, but my brother did. And he told me about it. And yeah, even he thought it was a goofy ass movie at the time. And I watched it on cable and agreed. But it is. It's entertaining. Same thing with this one. The Beast Within, where the woman gets raped by a giant cicada and then gives birth. And then 18 years later, the kid turns into a giant cicada. And again, 1981, drive-in movie. And it's absolutely ridiculous, although the transformation scene is still great. Okay, now we're going to get into exploitation at its best. Or worse, depending on your point of view. First, we're going to start off with Humanoids from the Deep. We're back to the Corman factory. And anybody who's seen this movie knows exactly what I'm talking about when I say exploitation, because this movie is beyond offensive. But my God, I love it. I've loved it since I was a child. And again, drive-in movie. I saw this one on cable. My brother and my sister saw this at the drive-in. My brother loved it. My sister hated it. I love it to this day. It's awesome. How about this for a cheese fest? And I mean that ironically, the Incredible Melting Man, because this guy is a melting hunk of cheese by the end of the movie. And again, 1977. That was a big year for these types of movies. And again, horrible, horrible movie, but great effects work from Rick Baker. And again, with a movie called The Incredible Melting Man, how could you not think that this was anything but an exploitation movie that you would see at a drive-in? We've got a couple of Alien ripoffs for you. First from the Corman factory. Well, both of these are from the Corman factory. First, Galaxy of Terror. And I've said before on the other videos where I've mentioned this, awesome steelbook, shitty movie. But drive-in. Definitely drive-in movie. In the following year, they did the same thing. And they even released some of the same sets from that Galaxy of Terror movie with this piece of shit, Forbidden World. But I love that steelbook. That steelbook is just awesome. But again, Corman Factory, drive-in movie. Now we're getting into horror movies. This one is definitely designed for that crowd. Most people have never even heard of this movie. Massacre at Central High. This is like a modern day Heathers. Really good movie. It's a solid movie, for what it is. And it's got a really solid cast. 1976. Again, exploitation film at its best. Check it out if you haven't seen it. The rest of these are straight out horror flicks. And 3 of them have become classics, for lack of a better word. And 1 has become a cult classic. First, we'll start with the cult classic, The Slumber Party Massacre. And again, with a title like that, you know what audience this is aimed at. It's a drive-in exploitation movie. But these last 3 are definitely classics. And all 3 of them got their starts at the drive-in. First, we're going to start off with Wes Craven's debut, Last House on the Left. This is a remake of the Virgin Spring, I believe it's called. And it's a hard watch, quite honestly. It's a very hard watch. I appreciate this movie. I respect this movie. I can't say I enjoy it. I've never enjoyed it. But I had to have it in my collection because, again, I do really admire Wes Craven. And this movie is not designed to make you feel good, and it doesn't. So on that level, it's very effective. And again, this was a notorious drive-in movie and grindhouse movie because at the time of its release, most theaters wouldn't even play it. This movie got an X rating when it came out, which is now an NC-17 for you younger viewers that don't know what an X is. Now, of course, it's unrated. And if it was released today, it would probably get an R. But as it is, this movie was shocking at the time. And yeah, that's exactly the type of movie that played at the drive-ins in the 70s. Same thing with his follow-up, The Hills Have Eyes. And again, just like Last House on the Left, I admire this movie more than I actually enjoy it. I appreciate it, I respect it, and it's got some great stuff in it, but it's not exactly a feel-good movie, you know? There's things in this movie I'm very uncomfortable with. I know I always have been. But again, this one I did not see theatrically. I saw this on cable. Same thing with Last House on the Left, and same thing with the last movie coming out. But I remember as a child seeing the ads in the paper for these movies at the local drive-in and hearing my older brothers talk about them. And then when this came out on video, seeing Michael Berryman on the cover, that alone scared the shit out of me before I finally saw the movie. Again, I like this movie. I don't love it. But this is probably the biggest drive-in movie I own from that time period. And it's Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And as it happens to be, this movie is now 50 years old. And I believe it came out 50 years ago this week at the time of this filming. And this movie was so popular, it played at the drive-ins for about 2 years, off and on. And this movie redefined the horror genre, and it made Hollywood take notice about these little independent movies that played the drive-in circuit, because Texas Chainsaw Massacre was a huge hit. It put Tobe Hooper on the map, and it made Leatherface an icon that lives to this day. But again, without that drive-in circuit, without that grindhouse circuit, without those exploitation movies, this movie never would have gotten a chance. That's another reason why I love drive-ins. Not so much now. Now they'll play anything, but they are built on the backbone of movies from genres that I absolutely love. I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give me a thumbs up, a possible subscribe. Most importantly, please leave comments below. Let me know how you feel about this video and these movies in general. So until the next time, I hope everybody's having a great night. We'll see you then.